The fog came rolling in over the ridges of Gifford Pinchot like breath from something ancient, something alive. It was early September 2018, a Wednesday morning that felt more like October, cold, damp, and utterly silent. The forest was still half asleep, the mist coiling between trunks of Douglas firs and red cedars, the smell of moss thick in the air. At a small, seldom-used campsite near Clearwater Creek, 24-year-old Evelyn Carter stirred inside her tent. Her alarm had gone off at 6:30 a.m., though she hadn't slept much anyway. She'd driven out from Portland 2 days earlier, escaping the noise of the city, hoping to finish a set of watercolor paintings for her upcoming gallery show. She'd chosen this place for its solitude. No crowds, no cell service, no interruptions. Just the trees and the sound of water moving over rock. Her journals, 3 of them, were filled with sketches of forests, waterfalls, and old logging bridges. She loved places where people had once lived and worked and then vanished, where nature had reclaimed everything. That morning, Evelyn zipped open her tent and stepped barefoot into the dew-soaked ground. She wore an oversized flannel shirt, paint-stained leggings, and carried her camera slung over one shoulder. Her auburn hair was tangled from sleep. She stretched, exhaled, and looked toward the trail that followed Clearwater Creek north, winding deeper into the Gifford Pinchot. It was the kind of morning that made you feel small, part of something far older than yourself. She poured water into her camping stove, made instant coffee, and wrote a quick note in her journal. The forest feels heavier today, like it's watching. By noon, Evelyn was gone. When rangers found her campsite 3 days later, everything looked perfectly in place. Her tent was zipped shut, sleeping bag neatly rolled. Her sketchbooks sat on the picnic table, open to pages filled with watercolor scenes, ferns, a bridge, a river bend, and on the last page, a rough, unfinished outline of a cabin. Her car, a forest green Subaru Outback, was still parked near the trailhead, keys inside the center console. There was no sign of struggle, no footprints, no scattered belongings. It was as if she had stepped into the trees and dissolved into the mist. The search began on September 8th after her younger sister, Melissa, called the county sheriff's office. Evelyn hadn't returned calls or texts in 3 days, which was unlike her. She was disciplined, dependable, the kind of person who sent postcards from everywhere she went. That first night, rangers hiked the Clearwater Trail under headlamps, calling her name until their voices echoed back empty. By dawn, search and rescue teams from Klickitat and Skamania counties arrived, bringing dogs, drones, and volunteers. They combed the riverbanks and ridgelines, followed game trails, checked abandoned logging roads. Nothing. Evelyn's scent was traced by dogs for almost a mile north of the campsite, but the trail stopped abruptly at a clearing beside a fallen cedar. The dogs circled the area, confused, whining, unable to pick up the scent again. Searchers found a small patch of flattened grass near the log, as if someone had been sitting or kneeling there. They also found a single object lying in the moss, a paintbrush, its wooden handle broken in half. The bristles were still wet with blue paint. News spread quickly. Local headlines read, "Artist missing in Gifford Pinchot," and for a week the forest filled with people, reporters, YouTubers, amateur investigators. Evelyn's parents flew in from Arizona, her father a retired engineer, her mother a former nurse. They stayed in a small cabin near Randall, Washington, waiting for updates that never came. Helicopters circled for days, divers searched the deeper pools of Clearwater Creek. Volunteers found a strip of torn fabric snagged on a branch near the water, forest green, possibly from Evelyn's jacket, but the lab couldn't confirm it belonged to her. Everything else was speculation. Detective Ryan Delgado, a veteran of the Skamania County Sheriff's Office, led the investigation. He'd seen more missing persons cases in the Gifford Pinchot than he liked to admit. Hunters, hikers, people running from something or toward it. But this one felt different. Evelyn hadn't been reckless. She'd logged her campsite registration, written the date and expected return, even left emergency contact info. She'd bought supplies for a full week. She wasn't the type to vanish without reason. Delgado started piecing together her last movements. Gas station footage from Trout Lake showed her filling up on September 4th, smiling, talking to the cashier about getting lost in the woods for a few days to paint. She'd bought a bag of trail mix, a lighter, and 2 gallons of water. Nothing unusual. Her phone last pinged a tower near Carson before losing service entirely. Her bank records showed no further activity. The ranger who checked her in remembered she'd asked about old structures nearby, specifically an abandoned ranger cabin north of Clearwater Creek, built sometime in the 1940s but burned down decades ago. Few people ever hiked that far. The trails were overgrown, the maps unreliable. Delgado noted it. He'd seen too many people underestimate that forest. By the 5th day, hope began to fade. Volunteers grew tired, the news crews left. The official search was scaled back to a maintenance level, occasional patrols, a few drones on clear days. But Evelyn's parents refused to leave. They drove the forest roads every morning, stopping at trailheads, handing out flyers, asking anyone they met if they'd seen something, anything. Some nights, they sat in silence on the porch of their rented cabin, listening to the sound of the wind moving through the trees, trying not to imagine what those sounds might be hiding.
A week later, a hiker named Dale Rowan reported something odd. He'd been fishing along the South Fork of Clearwater Creek when he noticed an easel half submerged near the bank. It was metal, folded up, with flecks of dried blue paint. Searchers recovered it the next morning. Nearby, under a layer of leaves, they found a single boot print, women's size 7, consistent with Evelyn's. The print faced away from the creek toward the tree line, but it was alone. No other prints followed. Delgado reopened full-scale search operations. This time, they brought in cadaver dogs and aerial thermal imaging. The dogs reacted strongly in one area, a ravine about a mile west of the campsite, but the terrain was nearly impossible to traverse. Dense thickets, slippery rock, and a narrow drop to the creek below. 2 days into the expanded search, one volunteer slipped, fractured his leg, and operations were temporarily halted. By October, the case went cold. Evelyn Carter's name joined the growing list of unsolved disappearances in the Gifford Pinchot. Online forums lit up with theories. Some blamed wild animals. Others hinted at human involvement, drifters, hermits, or worse. One theory, though, stood out. It claimed there were tunnels, remnants of old logging routes and mining shafts running beneath parts of the forest, sealed off decades ago. Maybe Evelyn had stumbled onto one, the poster wrote, and fallen through. Her mother refused to believe it. She said Evelyn was too careful, too aware of her surroundings. Something happened, something with a purpose, she told a reporter. In March 2019, 6 months after Evelyn's disappearance, snowmelt exposed something downstream. A Forest Service worker clearing debris from the creek near the highway bridge found a waterproof sketchbook lodged against a fallen log. Inside were several pages of smeared watercolor, nearly destroyed by water, but a few remained intact. One painting showed the river bend near her campsite. Another showed the old ranger cabin, except it wasn't burned down. In the painting, it looked whole, with light glowing from the windows. The last page was different. It wasn't a landscape at all. It was a portrait. A man's face, bearded, narrow-eyed, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Beneath it, written in small block letters, were the words, "He's not alone out here." The handwriting matched Evelyn's. Detective Delgado drove back to the forest that same day. He brought the sketchbook, stood at the riverbend where it had been found and looked toward the ridgeline. The forest was still, indifferent, the water dark and cold. He knew how easily the mind could conjure meaning from coincidence, but still the detail of the portrait unnerved him. Locals sometimes spoke of people living off-grid in the Gifford Pinchot, survivalists or ex-loggers who wanted no contact with the outside world. Most were harmless, but some weren't. Delgado reopened old ranger logs from the 1990s. A handful of reports mentioned transient camps, smoke sightings, and one specific incident. In 1997, a pair of hikers claimed they'd been followed for nearly a mile by a tall man in a hat near Clearwater Creek. The description wasn't much, but it was enough to stick in Delgado's mind. He ordered another limited search, focusing on the area north of the creek near where the old ranger cabin had supposedly stood. Metal detectors picked up remnants, rusted tools, nails, the base of a collapsed chimney, but no sign of anything recent. Then, just as the crew prepared to leave, one volunteer found something wedged between two stones near the foundation, a silver ring engraved with the initials EC. Evelyn's mother identified it immediately. She'd given that ring to her daughter for her 21st birthday. The find reignited the case. Investigators brought in forensic teams to survey the area with ground-penetrating radar. They uncovered fragments of fabric and a rusted lantern, both estimated to be decades old. But deeper scans revealed something stranger. A void beneath the site, roughly 12 feet across, possibly a collapsed cellar or storage pit from when the cabin still stood. Accessing it was dangerous. The soil was unstable, prone to collapse. They began excavating carefully over several days, but before they could reach the cavity, heavy rains forced the operation to stop. The site flooded overnight. By the time weather cleared, the pit had filled with mud and debris, making further digging impossible. The forest, once again, had swallowed its secrets. Years passed. Evelyn's parents eventually moved back to Arizona. Detective Delgado retired in 2022, but kept one box from his office, labeled Carter, E, containing her case file, photos, and a copy of the sketchbook. He'd sometimes take it out late at night, wondering where the truth had gone. Then, in April 2023, 5 years after Evelyn's disappearance, a wildfire burned through parts of the Clearwater drainage. When firefighters returned to assess the damage, they discovered the old cabin site exposed, the soil burned away, the structure's stone foundation fully visible. In the center, where the void had once been, there was a narrow opening. Inside, investigators found scattered remains of wood, metal, and charred debris. And something else. A fragment of cloth, pale blue, fused with melted plastic, the corner of a watercolor palette. DNA tests confirmed trace genetic material belonging to Evelyn Carter. But that wasn't the end of it. Along with the fragment, investigators found an old Polaroid camera wrapped in plastic sheeting. The film was degraded, nearly black, but lab technicians managed to restore one image. It showed a cabin interior lit by lantern light, a table, an open notebook, and in the doorway, the silhouette of a tall man wearing a hat. The timestamp read September 6, 2018, 8:14 p.m., the last night Evelyn was seen alive. No one could explain how that photo existed, who had taken it, or where the camera had come from. The forest had hidden it for 5 years, and now it had given it back, just long enough to remind everyone that the truth, whatever it was, had always been there, buried in roots and soil, waiting for someone to look close enough. Today, hikers still visit Clearwater Creek, though most don't stay long. The campsite where Evelyn pitched her tent is overgrown now, the picnic table covered in moss. Some say at dusk, if you stand by the river bend and listen closely, you can hear the faint sound of brush bristles scraping across canvas and see a flicker of blue light deep between the trees, like the stroke of a brush painting the air. Others swear they've seen a figure standing at the edge of the creek, barefoot, holding a camera, watching. The official record lists her as missing, presumed deceased, but locals know better. They say the Gifford Pinchot keeps what it takes, and sometimes, if you listen to the wind, you can almost hear the forest breathing, whispering the names of those who never found their way back. And somewhere out there, beyond the mist and the firs, the ghost of Evelyn Carter is still painting.